Everyone turned their attention to Stephen. "Why are you standing there in a daze? Do as he says and get on your knees," Helen urged. Mavis was even more direct. "You just have to kneel for 7 days, and everything you've ever wanted will be in your grasp." No one from the Cassidy and Haynes families tried to dissuade them. As for David, he considered this an opportunity for Stephen to save his life. This was the best outcome of his conflict with the Addams family. The only other option was death. Kim was the only one conflicted. She didn't want to see her husband humiliate himself for unlimited wealth and glory. But if Stephen refused, Johan might ruin the wedding. Or worse, he might even resort to violence. Many people were urging Stephen to comply with Johan's request, but he wasn't pressured. He stood there and met Johan's gaze calmly. "What's wrong? Are you hesitating?" Johan mocked. "Stephen, I know what you're thinking. You really want to return to our family, and you're worried that you'll miss this opportunity. But at the same time, you're afraid of ruining your image. If you want my advice, then throw your pride away. How much is your image worth compared to returning to the Addams family?" "He's right," Natalie said. "Are you trying to save face at a time like this?" Stephen shot her a glare. "I suggest you keep quiet and stay out of this." Natalie wisely shut her mouth. Johan grinned. "Stephen, the more irritable you are, the more it proves that you want it. This is an opportunity I'm only willing to give you once. Think about your mother. If you return to our family, all restrictions placed on her will be lifted. Both of you will become members of the Addams family. I've already said this much. The answer is obvious. What will you do?" But Stephen didn't move. He also didn't respond. Those who knew Stephen well, like the 4 great generals, Callan, the military base commanders, and the 4 gatekeepers, knew that after what he'd been through, Stephen would never kneel to Johan. Even if Terrence came in person, Stephen's decision would remain the same. No one in the Addams family was worthy enough to make Stephen get on his knees. A brief silence followed. It had only been 20 seconds, but to the Cassidy and Haynes families, it felt like a century had passed. In the end, it was Johan who broke the silence. "Stephen, I'll ask you one more time. Are you going to kneel or not?" Kyle couldn't stand it anymore. He felt the urge to grab Stephen's shoulders and push him to his knees. "What are you waiting for? Think about the finish line!" Helen, Gordon, and Mavis echoed his words. Soon, the entire venue was filled with voices urging Stephen to kneel. Stephen stared at the audience with a frown. Victoria had had enough. She stepped forward. "Mr. Johan, I'm Stephen's mother. I can kneel in his stead." Johan narrowed his eyes. "You? Well, a mother kneeling in place of her son does feel more sincere. And much more entertaining," he thought. It had only been a few months since Victoria and Stephen were reunited, and she knew that he wasn't someone who would give in so easily. He would never have agreed to Johan's request, but Johan was the successor, and his status was prestigious. It would be a huge blow to his pride if Stephen turned him down in public. "I'm not saying this because I want Stephen to return to the Addams family. I don't want anything from you. I only want one thing, and that is, I hope you can let us live in peace. I swear we won't give you any trouble." "Victoria, are you sure you want to do this? You'll have to kneel for 7 whole days. I know you did something similar for Stephen back then for 3 days, but this time it'll be 7. "I have no problem with that," Victoria replied. Johan shrugged. "Okay then, I promise. You fulfilling my request is the same as Stephen fulfilling my request. If I'm in a good mood afterwards, maybe I'll let you two return to the family." Helen, Gordon, and Mavis perked up. It was a good idea to have Stephen's mother take his place. In terms of rank, Victoria's background as a royal family member was much higher than the Cassidy and Haynes families, but they were nothing in front of the Addams family. At that moment, Angelo came forward and stopped them. "No, my daughter will not be kneeling." Victoria was his daughter, and she was the commander-in-chief's mother. It was preposterous to make her humiliate herself in front of Johan. "Aunt Victoria, don't listen to him," Stephanie said. Johan glanced at them. "Is the Sierra family going against me? When the Addams family imprisoned Victoria back then, the Sierra family hadn't objected. Why were they being so courageous today? Where was this bravery all those years ago? "No, we're not," Angelo replied firmly. "But my daughter cannot fulfill your request." Tremaine and the other royal family leaders also stood up. "Miss Victoria, you don't have to do this. We'll support you." Johann laughed wildly. "The 51 royal families are standing up for her. What happened to your respect for the Addams family? Just wait. After this is over, I won't let any of you go." Victoria hesitated when so many people tried to persuade her, especially Tremaine and the others. They were one of the strongest forces in New York City. Johann wasn't pleased to see that Victoria's resolve had been shaken. He glared at Tremaine and the others before turning back to Victoria. "You know what they say, Victoria. Young people don't have much patience these days. I'll give you 10 seconds to think it over. This is the only chance I'm giving you." As he spoke, he looked at his watch. "The countdown starts now. 10 seconds. 9 seconds. 8 seconds. Victoria became nervous again when Johann started counting. Matteo was watching silently from the sidelines. He was in disbelief. Was Johann crazy? He was threatening the commander-in-chief's mother. If this continued, Johann would die here. If the commander took action, even the Addam family's main branch wouldn't be able to stop him. "Mr. Johann, don't be rash," Matteo advised. "This is a wedding. It's not good luck to make a scene. Don't overstay your welcome. You should hurry back." Johann gave him a venomous look. "Matteo, you're a branch of the Addams family in Asheville. What's the meaning of this? Are you siding with the 51 royal families of New York City?" Matteo shrank back. "No, what I mean is, weddings are important occasions. It won't be good for your image as the successor to ruin the mood." Johann smirked. "I'm going to do more than ruin the mood. I'm going to turn this place into shambles. What are you going to do about it? Who's going to stop me?" Matteo sighed and retreated back to the sidelines. Because of Johann's status and his identity, he'd had a domineering personality since he was young. No one had ever talked back to him. It was the same in Maryland and Washington, D.C. With the way things were going, Johann was begging for death. He was unknowingly provoking the commander-in-chief. Even if Terrence came in person, there was no guarantee that they would leave unscathed. Matteo had tried to talk Johann out of it, but he wouldn't listen. Whatever happens next wouldn't be his fault. While Johann was distracted by Matteo, Tremaine and the other royal family leaders tried to dissuade Victoria. Helen, Gordon, and Mavis watched anxiously. This was a golden opportunity from the Cassidy and Haynes families to build a connection with the Addams family. They didn't want to give this up. "Victoria, 10 seconds have passed. What are you waiting for?" Helen asked impatiently. If Victoria fulfilled Johann's request, they would become the relatives of the Addams family. The Sierra family would count for nothing. Stephen had been quiet all this time, but he finally spoke. "Mom, you can't kneel. Not in front of Johann, Terrence, or anyone from the Addams family. No one has the right to make you get on your knees." Victoria gave him a long look. "Okay," she said after a pause. Stephen turned to Johann. "I won't be heeding either of your requests. You, Terrence, and the previous heads of the Addams family, none of you are worthy. It would be wise for you to kneel and admit your wrongdoings. When I come for the Addams family in the future, maybe I'll spare you." Helen, Gordon, and Mavis were stunned. Was Stephen crazy? Where did he get the courage to turn Johann's request on him? It was a clear provocation to the Addams family. "Stephen, you're really something," Johann said. "Did you know that with these words alone, I would have the basis to get rid of everyone here in an instant?" Helen decided to throw away her pride. "Mr. Johann, don't listen to Stephen's nonsense. He's too stubborn for his own good. We are willing to fulfill your request in Stephen's place, and will make sure to thoroughly discipline him afterward." "Please give us a chance," Mavis echoed. Before Johann could say anything, the Cassidy and Haynes families dropped to their knees. Maintaining their reputation couldn't be compared to establishing a connection with the Addams family. If they were successful, no one would remember today's events. The focus would be on their new identity as the Adam family's relatives. Johann spread his hands. Stephen, do you see that? Your wife's family has a better grasp on the situation than you. But it's a shame. I gave you a chance and you didn't take it. My previous offer is void. The Cassidy and Haynes families slowly stood up in disappointment. Mavis cursed. Why are you so uselessly prideful? You missed the opportunity of your life. The rest of the family chimed in. You made us get on our knees for nothing. This is a typical example of dying for the sake of one's reputation and harming others in the process. Johann was amused by the harsh criticisms directed at Stephen. You heard what they said. Having a backbone is useless when you're up against someone out of your league. The bodyguards behind Johann snickered. Johann, I've tolerated you for a long time, Stephen said, his voice low. If today wasn't my wedding, I would have already gotten rid of you. Leave before I change my mind. Stephen had prepared for months to have the wedding of the century. He didn't want to do anything he would regret. He would let Johann go for now and settle the score with him later. Helen interjected. Stephen, what are you talking about? He's here to attend the wedding. Why are you kicking him out? Do you have a conscience? He even brought you 3 wedding gifts. They had all lost their chance to get close to the Addams family, so they should at least accept Johann's gifts. Then they could at least brag that during Kim and Stephen's wedding, the successor of the Addams family had visited and given them 3 lavish gifts. Oh, I almost forgot, Johann said, his lips curling into a smile. Actually, I don't care about your wedding. I only came to give you your 3 wedding gifts. He gestured to his bodyguards. Bring them inside. The crowd parted and made way for them. A group of 6 bodyguards carried 3 items towards the stage. Johann's gifts were large. Each one was covered with a black silk cloth, so none of the guests would see what was inside. But a wedding was a festive occasion. Choosing a black cloth out of all the colors seemed out of place. The guests' attention was fixed on the black silk cloth covering Johann's 3 wedding gifts for Stephen. As expected of the #1 family in the country, you're really generous, Kyle praised. His enthusiasm left the guests at a loss for words. It was obvious that the gifts wouldn't be suitable for a wedding. The black cloth was a clear sign. Johann smiled. They weren't that expensive, but I guarantee that they're the perfect gifts for Stephen. He snapped his fingers. Remove the cloth. One of his bodyguards lifted the cloth from the first gift. The unveiled object stunned everyone into silence. Kyle's smile froze. It was a memorial tablet, and Stephen's name was engraved on the front. I heard there was a memorial tablet just like this when Victoria was under house arrest. You broke it when you took her away. So now, I'll be returning what belongs to you. What do you think? You can tell how sincere I am from my first gift, right? Johann didn't wait for Stephen to answer. He gestured to his bodyguard. Look, he's so touched that he can't get the words out. He'll definitely like the second and third gifts even more. Open them all. The silk claws were lifted, revealing a cremation urn and a wreath. How could I leave you without an urn and a wreath? They go hand in hand with the memorial tablet. This way, you won't be lonely on your path to hell. Helen, Gordon, and Mavis and the rest of the family stared at the gifts, not knowing what to say. This was Kim and Stephen's wedding. It was clear that Johann was here to ruin the wedding. Stephen's group was seething. Presenting these gifts at the commander-in-chief's wedding was blatant disrespect. Zachary clenched his fists. His knuckles cracked. Mr. Adams, let me kill that ignorant brat, he said in a low voice. After that, I'll head to Maryland and annihilate the Adams family. Zachary was the strongest of the 4 great generals, and his temper was just as fierce as his strength. This time, no one tried to stop the imminent bloodshed, because they were all thinking the same thing, including Stephen. First, they would dispose of Johann. Then, they would ruin the Adams family. Johann had an entirely different scheme in mind. His 3 gifts served as a provocation. As long as Stephen attacked him first, he would have enough reason to kill him without affecting Terrence's succession ceremony. Just as Stephen was about to give an order, Kim grabbed his hand. Wait, Stephen, don't. If they had a direct confrontation with Johann, there was no guarantee that any of them would emerge unharmed. And with Johann's thousands of bodyguards, Stephen's side was at a disadvantage. She didn't want to see Stephen and his friend's blood being spilled on their wedding day. Stephen changed his words when he saw the worried look on Kim's face. Let him go for now, Zachary. When the time comes, I won't let him off so easily. Zachary nodded. He knew that Stephen meant every word. Stephen, stop pretending, Johann called out. This memorial tablet, urn, and wreath are from me. And today's your wedding. You must want to tear me to pieces. I'm standing right here. It's your chance to take revenge. But if you don't want to make a move, then I'll be leaving. I gave you your wedding gifts, so my job here is done. There's no need for me to stay any longer than I have to. Johann turned, left the stage, and made his way to the door. But he walked slowly, waiting for Stephen to make his move. The feeling of having someone in the palm of his hand was exhilarating. It would be boring to kill Stephen in one strike. Dragging it out and playing with him was much more entertaining. Zachary gritted his teeth. If it weren't for Mr. Adams, I would have already ripped you to shreds. Is that so? Unfortunately, I'm leaving soon, so you won't have the chance. John stepped outside the venue with his bodyguards. He turned around to give Stephen one last provocation. Are you sure you want to let me go like this? Get lost, Zachary said, slamming the door in his face. You don't need to throw away the gifts from Johann, Stephen instructed his group. I'll return them after the wedding's over. They're of no use to me, but I believe they'll be useful to Johann soon. Understood. Dennis sent a few people to collect the gifts and take them away. The wedding continued as if Johann had never been there. Kim, I'm really sorry, Stephen said. Guilt laced his voice. I wanted to give you the perfect wedding, but I let a commotion like this happen. Kim smiled. It's okay. Nothing can be perfect. Besides, today will become an unforgettable memory for both of us, don't you think? Also, I'm proud of you for standing up to Johann. It couldn't have been easy. Stephen squeezed her hand. I may be useless to the Adams family, but you don't have to worry. They won't be able to do anything to me. Okay, I'll take your word for it, Kim said. Let's forget about what happened and continue with our wedding. It's not over. Oh, right, weren't you preparing a surprise before Johann showed up? Are you ready? Stephen gave her a smile. I am. Rosalind handed him a brocade box. A stunning ring was inside. Stephen lifted Kim's hand and slipped the ring on her finger. It's beautiful, Kim breathed. The ring was decorated with a diamond from a cave in Antarctica. There was only one of its kind in the entire world. Rosalind held out another box. A matching necklace was inside. Stephen leaned in and helped Kim put on the necklace. It was just as priceless as the ring. But Kim knew that this wasn't the surprise he'd had planned. She brushed her fingers over the jewel on the necklace. It was cool to the touch. The ring on her hand shimmered as it caught the lighting. I love it, Stephen. I'm glad you like it. Now, I'll reveal the long-awaited surprise. Stephen had planned to marry Kim as the commander-in-chief or the Grand Palace Master for a long time. In the end, he'd settled for the first option. He'd gone as far as to put on the uniform, but Johann had messed up his plans. All of the guests knew about his connection to the Adams family, so it wasn't convenient for him to reveal his identity as the commander. Fortunately, he had another identity. Kim, I wanted to reveal my real identity at our wedding, Stephen started. The guests perked up and listened intently. I'm actually the owner of the Wyvern Group. He couldn't announce his identity as the commander-in-chief for the time being, but being the owner of the Wyvern Group was a decent alternative. The Adams family was already aware of it anyway. The Cassidy and Haynes families were astonished. Wasn't Stephen the director of the security department at the Wyvern Group? How did he go from being a security guard to the owner? Like he'd warned them before the wedding, none of them could have seen this coming. It was well known that the Wyvern Group had fended off Neil Brandt, Sanson Corporation, and Zanger Corporation after becoming their targets. Helen, Gordon, and Mavis thought back to Stephen's bold attitude whenever they confronted him. He wasn't being arrogant. It was because he had the background to back up his confidence. No wonder Tremaine had come all the way here to congratulate him and Kim on their wedding. It was because Stephen had the capability to make the 51 royal families submit to him. As for Kim, the puzzle came together in an instant. The missing pieces she couldn't make sense of in the past were filled. When the Haynes family took her company, Lunaria, and kicked her out, the Wyvern Group gave her an opportunity to attend Tanith Corporation's bid without asking for anything in return. They'd supported her continuously behind the scenes to develop her company. Tanith Corporation was now one of the leading businesses in Washington, D.C. They were on par with the Wyvern Group. This also explained Jasmine's strange reaction after she came back from Mantis Island. Stephen was the owner of the Wyvern Group, and all of this was possible because of him. The thought had crossed Kim's mind before. As the director of the security department, it was odd that he had had such a close relationship with the owner and the CEO, Dennis. After Jasmine discovered the owner's real identity, she looked like she wanted to say something every time he came up in conversation. Moreover, Jasmine's attitude towards Stephen completely changed after coming back from the island. She was much more polite to him. Kim had thought it was strange that the owner would help her so much when they'd never met. She sometimes had a feeling that his real identity was Stephen, but she didn't have the evidence. Whenever she confronted Stephen about it, he'd deny it with some random excuse. It turned out that he really was the owner. Tears pricked Kim's eyes. So it was you who's been supporting me behind the scenes all this time. And here I thought you were only fooling around with nothing to do all day. 6 years ago, Stephen had lost Felicity Corporation. 6 years later, he'd taken back his company and become the owner of the Wyvern Group. All of this had happened without her knowing. She couldn't even begin to imagine all the hardships Stephen had gone through to get to this point today. Stephen, your surprise is too much for me to handle. Kim threw herself into Stephen's arms and cried. Ever since the beginning, the Cassidy and Haynes families never had a right to stop them from being together. And Helen's condition for Stephen to earn $1 billion in 1 month could have been easily fulfilled. As the owner of the famed Wyvern Group, how could he be short $1 billion? Stephen stroked Kim's hair to comfort her as she buried her face in his chest. He really wanted to tell her that this wasn't the real surprise, but he held back the urge. Stephen glanced at the oddly quiet audience. The reactions were far from what he'd been expecting. The atmosphere had turned gloomy. They did not look happy. The Cassidy and Haynes families had been surprised to find out that Stephen was the owner of the Wyvern Group, but they quickly realized that it was useless. His identity was second to none in the business industry, but he was worth nothing in the face of the Addams family. Not to mention, he'd been caught up in a complicated conflict with them. If Stephen went against the Addams family head-on, the outcome would be the same whether or not he was the owner. He wouldn't even have a chance to fight back. "Why are you all so quiet?" Stephen asked the audience in confusion. "Haven't you been waiting for my surprise? Shouldn't you be excited?" David was the first to express his opinion. "It's a good thing that you're the owner, but you're still not strong enough to go against the Addams family." Victoria hadn't stopped worrying since Johan showed up. "I know you're reluctant to lower your head to the Addams family. I'm proud of your achievements, but the Wyvern Group won't be enough to deal with the Addams family. Why don't we plead with Johan and ask him to let us go?" Helen rushed to follow up. "Even if you don't care about yourself, think about Kim and your child." Stephen didn't respond, so Mavis added, "Your reputation, image, and dignity is that important? You've provoked the Addams family, but you can resolve their grudge by simply asking for forgiveness. Why can't you understand that?" Gordon nodded. "If you and your brother make up, you can return to the family again. You'll be well respected, and you'll be able to do anything you want. As it stands, you can't match up to the Addams family, even if you're the owner of the Wyvern Group." Helen, Gordon, and Mavis wasted no time trying to persuade Stephen. His identity as the owner of the Wyvern Group surpassed their own achievements by more than a mile, but the Addams family was in a different league. Although Stephen had missed out on a golden opportunity to fulfill Johan's request, they couldn't give up without trying. If he successfully clung to the Addams family, it would greatly benefit both the Cassidy and Haynes families. "Why are you hesitating?" Helen urged. I admit that being the owner of a successful company like the Wyvern Group is impressive, but don't lie to yourself. The Addams family is out of your reach. Mr. Johan was right when he said that the environment you've been in for the past few years has made you conceited. When you're among us, no one can match up to you. But once you set foot outside, you'll realize that there is always someone more impressive. The Addams family is like the ocean. You're just one of the many waves at risk of being swallowed. Helen paused to catch her breath. Then she continued. Mr. Johan has made it clear that if you kneel for 7 days, he'll let bygones be bygones. He's given you a way out, and it's not too late. Even if you can't return to the family, at least you'll be spared. You're competent, and when it comes to business, so why can't you see the big picture when it matters? This is a matter of self-respect, Stephen retorted after she finished her lengthy speech. Helen scoffed. Self-respect? What a joke. How much is that worth? Can it be compared to your mother's life? What about Kim or your child? Mavis agreed. You're the Addams family's target now, but because their blood is in you, Mr. Johan was lenient. He gave you a chance to kneel and return to the family. You've lost your chance, so just give in and apologize to him properly. Wouldn't that satisfy everyone and save your own life? Think of it like a family reunion. It's not that hard. A family reunion? Stephen sneered. The Addams family has never thought of me as one of them, and they will never be my family. You're always preaching about reputation and the like, but when it comes down to it, it's not worth as much as you make it out to be. But I'm not like that. I have values that none of you will ever be able to understand. This self-respect that you all don't think much of, I want to keep it, and I'll handle my own business however I see fit. Stephen's words were equivalent to looking down on Helen, Gordon, and Mavis. You must really want to die. Aside from the Wyvern Group, there's nothing else you can do, Helen spat. But my company alone isn't going to ruin the Cassidy family, Stephen pointed out. Helen glared daggers at him but said nothing. Gordon interrupted. Stephen, you're still too young and inexperienced. Even if self-respect is important to you, think of what's at stake. Your life is on the line. I'd rather die than humiliate myself in front of them, Stephen said. Self-respect and dignity are two different concepts, and throwing away your pride and worth as a person doesn't make you capable. While they were arguing, Kim had taken the time to compose herself. She spoke up. He's right. How is letting people walk all over you different from living as a corpse? Is this what you want from Stephen? Do you want him to humiliate himself just to live as the Addams family's dog that they can dispose of whenever they want? That's where you're wrong, David said. You and Stephen might not think the same way, but to us upper-class families, forging a connection with the Addams family is an unparalleled honor. If it were me, I'd be willing to do anything to be the Addams family's chew toy, Gordon declared. Mavis shot him a glare. Forget it. Didn't you hear what David said? There are many people eyeing that position. You'll be at the back of the line. Kim was dumbfounded. The strangest viewpoints were coming out of their mouths. It was inconceivable. What exactly was wrong with this world? If it meant that they could reach a superior position, they were willing to throw away their worth, even if they had to be someone's doormat. That's enough, Kim gritted out. This discussion is over. If Stephen doesn't want to give in to the Addams family, then I'll support his decision. You've become a faithful wife indeed, Helen mocked. Victoria stepped in between them when Kim was about to argue back. Lunch is about to be served. Let's eat first. Helen, Gordon, Mavis, and the others groaned in exasperation, but left it at that. The atmosphere had turned frigid, and the wedding Stephen had prepared for so long ended on a bad note. If it wasn't for Johan's interruption, Stephen would have revealed his identity as the commander-in-chief, and he would have shocked the audience as he'd planned. Along with the 4 great generals, Callan, the military base commanders, and the 4 gatekeepers, it would have become a real wedding of the century. Kim, I'm really sorry, Stephen said when they were seated. He felt guilty. I didn't know things would turn out this way. Kim gave him a reassuring smile. It doesn't matter what they think. I loved your surprise. And now I know that you've been supporting me behind the scenes all this time. That's enough for me. I'll always be on your side, no matter what you get caught up in. Don't worry, Kim. I won't let anyone harm you or our child. After leaving the wedding venue, Johann returned to their family's mansion in the district with his bodyguards. His subordinate, Hector, followed closely. Mr. Johann, are you going to let Stephen go? When did I say that? Johann snapped. I gave him 3 gifts, but he kept calm instead of lunging for me the first chance he got. He really does have our family's blood. Hector agreed. He even turned down your offer to let him return to the family in exchange for fulfilling one of your requests. I told you, he may be an illegitimate son, but he has our blood. He wouldn't lower his head to just anyone. I'd like to see how long he'll be able to keep that up. Johann looked at his watch. After the main event is over, it should be Stephen's wedding night, right? Yes, Hector confirmed. Perfect. I won't give him an easy death. I'll torture him slowly and wear down his psyche. That would be even more satisfying than killing him directly. Johann waved for Hector to come closer and whispered his plan. He nodded and left the house to carry out his orders. Unfortunately, unlike what Johann had predicted, Stephen was not in the middle of his wedding night. After Johann's interruption and the big argument that followed, Stephen and Kim weren't in the mood. Most of the guests had left by the time the wine was served. Stephen, the 4 great generals, the military base commanders, and the 4 gatekeepers were still here. Adrian Wynne, Stephen's mentor, had joined them. They chatted around the table like in the old days. It was nostalgic to see everyone gathered again, and Stephen felt like he'd returned to his days in the army. After 3 rounds of drinking, the topic once again shifted to the Addams family. Stephen, Adrian began. He was the only soldier who called Stephen by his first name. When I first met you, I knew that your future would be limitless, but I didn't expect for you to become the commander-in-chief. Stephen chuckled. I'll have to thank you for seeing my potential. I saw your potential, but it was your hard work and talent that got you this far. Adrian paused before continuing. You're the commander-in-chief, but the Addams family won't be that easy to deal with. You don't know that much about them, right? Stephen shook his head. No. For the most part, he'd been ignored during his time with the Addams family, so he didn't know much about them. He remembered resenting them every day. What can you tell me about them? To be honest, I'm far from qualified to understand the Addams family, but I can tell you with certainty that they're a force to be reckoned with. Everyone at the table tensed, except for Stephen. Adrian's martial arts weren't on par with the rest of him, but without him, Stephen wouldn't have become the commander-in-chief, which meant the 4 great generals, Callan, and the others wouldn't be here either. That was why they didn't doubt Adrian. They trusted his judgment. It's hard to put it into words. Adrian thought for a moment. Let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of the United States combat sovereignty rankings? Before Stephen led his forces to defeat the alliance of 40 countries 6 years ago, the United States' strategy when faced with conflict was to keep a low profile. They would hold back their true capabilities and slowly accumulate their strength. They retreated from every international conflict out of goodwill and sincerity and hoped to settle things peacefully with the other party. But to the countries overseas, this was a sign of weakness and fear. That was what led the 40 countries colluding with one another to launch an attack on the United States. After Stephen appeared out of nowhere and pushed back the opposing forces, the United States finally understood that blindly holding back would only result in the other party overtaking them inch by inch. Ever since then, they had changed their external strategy. They implemented the mentality of the foreign countries, which was to fight fire with fire instead of holding back. With Stephen on their side, it was possible to face each conflict directly while internally developing their forces. For example, a month ago, during the negotiations with the Warhawk country, the United States' Foreign Affairs Ambassador pointed out that the Warhawk country did not have the right to speak down to them with their strength and status. At the same time, the United States' military took more of an offensive stance during clashes with other countries. The foreign countries had a different perspective of them, and thus, the United States' combat sovereignty rankings were born. The combat sovereignty rankings are confirmation of our country's strength, Adrian explained. All soldiers who make the list are our military's elites.
Naturally, Stephen had heard of the combat sovereignty rankings. The 4 great generals, Callan, the military base commanders, and the 4 gatekeepers had the qualifications to rank at the top of the list. But their identities were confidential, so their true strength was a secret known only to Stephen. It would never be revealed to the public. Therefore, none of their names were on the list. Adrian went on. There are 200 active soldiers on the list, and they're all the elites of war. There are 30 among them who are the members of the Addams family. Another 50 aren't members, but they have close ties with the family. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they're the Addams family students. Dennis frowned. Doesn't that mean out of the 200 people on the list, 80 of them are closely tied to the Addams family? Adrian nodded. They are a 1,000-year-old family. Ranking first in the country is not just for show. This is only the tip of the iceberg. The rest of their forces are unknown. His gaze shifted to Stephen. The conflict between you and the Addams family won't be easy to settle. I told you about the combat sovereignty rankings to warn you to be careful when you confront them. You're now the commander-in-chief, and you're an important existence to the country. Our future is in your hands. Thank you for your concern, Stephen said. But I'll continue down this path. They made my mother suffer for so many years. I can't let them go. Stephen was insistent, so Adrian couldn't say anything else. He could only give a few more words of advice. Their drinking session continued until late into the night. It wasn't easy for all of them to meet up, and they didn't know when they would meet again. One of the staff came over and informed their table that someone was here to pass on a message. Let him in, Stephen said. He was curious as to who would be delivering a message this late at night. Hector walked in. Zachary recognized him with one glance. Aren't you Johan's follower? Are you here for a beating? Just as he was prepared to greet Hector with a fist to the face, Hector waved his hands in surrender. Wait, I didn't come here for a fight. Zachary lowered his hand. Then what are you doing here? Spit it out if you have something to say. Hector ignored him and went straight to Stephen. Mr. Johan thought that you would be with your wife on your wedding night. He never would have guessed that you'd be drinking with your friends here. I pity your wife. Stephen shot him a sideways glance. Enough with the nonsense. I'll give you 10 seconds to talk. As he began counting, Hector stopped with the provocations and hurriedly explained. I came to tell you that there's someone who's saved your life multiple times. He's in danger now. Don't you want to hear the details? Stephen recalled his escape from the Addams family 6 years ago. At that time, with the family's strength, it wouldn't have been difficult for them to kill him, but he miraculously escaped their manhunt and survived. Aside from his fortuitous encounter with the priest, there was another person who was the main reason he lived. Vincent Addams. Vincent had been responsible for getting rid of him. If he hadn't gone easy on Stephen, then perhaps he would have been caught by the Addams family a long time ago. Hector was implying that the Addams family had found out about Vincent's betrayal, but Stephen couldn't be sure. He decided to test him. Who are you talking about? Hector snorted. Stephen, stop pretending. You and I both know that it was Vincent. Before Stephen could respond, Victoria, who had overheard their conversation, hurried over. What did you do to him? Hector laughed. It sounds like that traitor has betrayed us more than once. Stephen turned to Victoria for an explanation. Back then, because of the Addams family's influence, everyone was too scared to help me give birth. It was Vincent who secretly found a midwife for me. I gave birth to you on a stormy night. After you were born, the Addams family's first reaction was to kill you. Vincent tried to protect us. He even persuaded your father to let you live with them. I see. So Uncle Vincent has been protecting me since I was born. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. If you ask me, it's Vincent's fault for meddling where he didn't belong, Hector said. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't be in this predicament. Stephen slugged him. Be quiet. I won't let you criticize him. Hector staggered back in surprise. Do you know who I am? I'm Mr. Johan's personal bodyguard. Laying a hand on me is the same as disrespecting him. Stephen didn't even look at him. Johan means nothing to me. Fine, Hector said through clenched teeth. Vincent is with Mr. Johan right now. You have 1 hour. If you don't come within the hour, then Vincent will be killed." He didn't wait for an answer before turning to leave. "Stephen, are you going to save him?" Victoria asked. "I have to go. It's thanks to him that I'm alive. He was caught by Johan because of us." "Stephen, actually," Victoria trailed off. She wanted to persuade Stephen not to go. Hector was Johan's subordinate. This was definitely a trap. Revealing Vincent's whereabouts as bait to lure Stephen to them. Johan must have already made sufficient preparations to get rid of him when he arrived. Victoria didn't want to see Stephen walking to his death, but Vincent was their savior, and she didn't want him to be killed because of them. She didn't want Stephen to feel guilty for Vincent's death. Either choice would result in death. The question was, how many? "Mom, I know what you're going to say," Stephen interrupted. "Today was my wedding with Kim. I should stay with her tonight. But there are people who won't leave us alone. Vincent helped us in times of need. How could I not care? But the way things are, Johan and I will have a confrontation sooner or later. Why not let it be tonight?" "Okay, I'll support your decision," Victoria said helplessly. "Don't worry, I'll definitely bring Uncle Vincent back alive." "We'll go with you," Dennis said. "No need. This is a grudge between me and Johan. It's not a good idea for you guys to step in. Stay here and protect my mother and Kim." Victoria watched Stephen leave by himself. It hadn't been easy for them to reunite. She couldn't let him walk to his grave like this. She found an opportune moment when no one was paying attention to her and slipped into the night. The mansion that Johan and his bodyguards were staying at had once belonged to the richest man in Washington, D.C. After the Addams family came to the district, the richest man disappeared, and naturally, the mansion became theirs. At this time, Johan was in the yard, leaning back on a deck chair with a glass of wine in his hand. The table next to him was filled with scrumptious dishes. This scene alone could pass for a wealthy young man relaxing in the yard, if it weren't for the bloody body hanging upside down from a tree tied by a rope. Vincent was covered in wounds, and a pool of blood had formed beneath him on the ground. If this continued, even if Johan didn't do anything, he would die. Johan brought the glass to his lips as he admired the night sky. "The stars are most beautiful when bathed in blood. Don't you agree, Vincent?" There was no response. He went over to where Vincent was hanging. "I know you want to die, but you can't. On the bright side, you have around an hour left. By the end, you'll know what it feels like to have your body emptied of blood. Of course, it won't be painless." Johan splashed the wine on Vincent's wounds. He let out a blood-curdling scream. "You're a monster without humanity," Vincent said through clenched teeth. "Still have the energy to insult me?" Johan splashed more wine on Vincent's wounds. "The pain will keep you awake. Hold on until Stephen comes, okay? If you die before he gets here, then this game will be meaningless." Vincent's blood mixed with the wine seemed to flow even faster. Hector, who was standing behind Johan, checked the time on his phone. "It's already been half an hour. He might not come tonight." "That won't happen," Johan said confidently. "He'll definitely come. I'm a good judge of character. Stephen is self-righteous. He values kindness, love, and friendship. They're good qualities, but they're nothing but burdens to those who have ambitions. And he's in too deep to change his ways. Vincent has saved his life many times in the past. He wouldn't sit around and wait for him to die." "He'll come even if he finds out this is a trap," Hector agreed. "What a waste," Johan said. "He'll never catch up to me if he's so sentimental." From their conversation, Vincent realized that Johan was trying to lure Stephen to his territory and get rid of him once and for all. "You're as inhumane as your father," Vincent gritted out. "Despite your differences, Stephen is your brother, has the Addams family's blood." Johan's smile faded. "My brother? That bastard is not related to me. No one in the family acknowledges him as one of us anyway. It's impossible for him to return. Everyone knows he's alive now, and I can't dispose of him openly. But what if I accidentally killed him in a self-defense before he attacked me first? The blame will be on him." "You're the devil," Vincent spat. Did you just figure that out? Johann stepped back and examined him. But you're not looking too good. Think you can hold on until Stephen gets here? All of a sudden, the gate flew open and it shattered to pieces. Stephen appeared in the midst of the dust. He slowly made his way to Johann. I'm here! Johann smirked. As expected, Stephen had taken the bait. The mansion would be his grave. Stephen, you shouldn't have come here, Vincent said. Stephen was talented, but Johann had been brought up by the Addams family. In terms of physical strength, he was no match for Johann. More than 1,000 bodyguards emerged from all directions and surrounded Stephen. Each of them was capable of taking down Erickson in an instant. Restrain him, Hector ordered. No, Johann said. Let him come over. The bodyguards moved like a tide and opened up a path. They kept their guard up. The moment Stephen made any suspicious movements, they would strike. Stephen made his way down the makeshift path until he was face to face with Johann. He glanced at Vincent, who was hanging upside down from a tree. Anger swelled inside him at the sight of Johann treating him so cruelly. Johann laughed when he saw Stephen's gaze on Vincent. Look carefully. That's Vincent, your savior. If he didn't go easy on you for 6 years ago, you wouldn't have survived until this day. So, now that you've seen your savior suffer, how do you feel? Stephen's heart clenched. I'm glad I was able to see you again after all these years, Vincent said, his voice barely audible. But you shouldn't be here. Leave as soon as possible. Vincent was concerned about him, even though his life was hanging by a thread. Stephen glared at Johann. I came as you asked me to. Why aren't you letting him go? Do you really think I would let him go just because you're here? It's not impossible for me to free him, though, but it will depend on you. Johann's bodyguards crowded around Stephen again. Vincent gathered all of his strength to yell, Forget about me! Leave and save yourself! Just then, another group of the Addams family's subordinates rushed past the gates. Johann was confident that with his bodyguards and the family's subordinates, Stephen would be dead in a matter of seconds. After getting rid of him, Johann would announce to the public that Stephen had killed Vincent, and in an act of revenge, Johann had killed him. He would spin the tale to make it seem like he had no choice. That way, no one would blame him, and the Addams family would praise him for delivering justice. The lowest-ranking members of the Addams family were considered servants. Cedric and Erickson were prime examples. Disposing of Stephen would help Johann gain favorability from the servants. Servant was at the bottom of the ranks, and their status was the lowest of low. But having their support would benefit Johann when he inherited the position as head of the family from his father. Meanwhile, Victoria had left the wedding venue alone. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number that existed in the depths of her memory. The phone rang, but no one answered. Please pick up, Victoria murmured. The call was redirected to voicemail, but she didn't give up. She called 3 times before someone finally answered. A deep voice came from the other line. Hello? Who is this? It's Victoria. A long silence followed. She could tell that Terrence was surprised to have received a call from her. Terrence's displeased voice sounded from her phone after a few minutes. How dare you call me? I had no choice. Time is of the essence, so I'll get to the point. I only have one request. Please let Stephen go. If you do that, I promise we'll stay far away from the Addams family. We'll hide in the corner of the world where no one will be able to find us. We'll never bother you again. Terrence fell silent. After a moment, he said, Victoria, I hope you can understand that it's not that I don't want to let Stephen go. That bastard is conceited and thinks too highly of himself. He said he wanted to fight the Addams family. Even if I let him go, the family won't stop. I can't stop them even if I am the head of the family. Even when you're calling him that, Victoria said bitterly. I thought you thought of him as your own son. Okay, I understand. This is the last time I'm going to ask something of you. If you let him go, I'll do anything you want. I can kneel in front of the Addams family's residence for 3 days as I did in the past. Well, I can promise you I won't lay a hand on Stephen, but it's hard to say for the others in the family. They found out that he was alive. There are many who are worried that he'll tarnish their reputation. They'll probably attempt to kill him to prevent future complications. Terrence had cleverly kicked the ball to the other court. He wouldn't be the one to kill Stephen, but he couldn't guarantee that the others would back down. He was fulfilling Victoria's request, and at the same time, he could manipulate others into getting rid of Stephen. Victoria wasn't stupid. She saw right through him. You just won't let him go. Fine. But Terrence, you should know that I'm aware of a secret that you've been keeping hidden all these years. If you don't guarantee Stephen's safety, I'll expose you. Victoria, are you crazy? Terrence's voice shook with anger. Only one incident came to mind, and if the Addams family found out, he would lose his position. Victoria has been the sole witness. Victoria, do you remember what you said back then? You told me you'd keep this a secret for the rest of your life. You promised you wouldn't tell a soul. Are you going back on your word? You kept saying that you loved me. Was it all a lie? I did love you back then, Victoria said. But now, I have someone I love more than you, and that's my son. I plan to keep your secret for the rest of my life, but I have no choice now that Stephen's in danger. Don't blame me, Terrence. You forced my hand. Terrence quickly tried to appease her. Don't be impulsive. Everything can be negotiated. I can promise you that Stephen's life won't be in danger. I'll guarantee his survival. But what if you use this to threaten me again in the future? Wouldn't that put me in a tight spot? You know very well what kind of person I am. I promise that as long as no harm comes to Stephen, I'll never expose you. Still, I don't feel secure knowing you have that leverage over me, Terrence said. Only the dead tell no tales. Victoria was the only one who knew Terrence's weakness. If it were anyone else, they would have been disposed of a long time ago. The only reason he hadn't killed Victoria yet was because he knew that she loved him deeply. She was the type of person who would never reveal his secret, not even if the Addams family scorned her and her son. But the situation was different now. Stephen's life was at risk, and Victoria was using Terrence's secret to threaten him. He had no choice but to get rid of her. Victoria knew what Terrence meant. He wanted her to die. This was something she hadn't predicted. The man she'd loved was going to kill her off for the sake of his secret. Victoria had reunited with Stephen not too long ago, and she'd also attended his wedding with Kim. She shouldn't have any more regrets, but she found herself hesitating. Even so, if it were to protect Stephen, her death would be worth it. Victoria was silent for a long time before she finally spoke. Okay, but you have to promise me that you won't let anyone hurt my son in the future. Once this is over, I'll head to Maryland and let you do as you wish. Stephen's existence posed a danger to Terrence's position, but his secret was a much greater threat. He agreed to Victoria's proposal without hesitation. Wait for my call, Victoria said. She hung up and ran in the direction of the Addams family's mansion in the district. Back at the mansion, Stephen was still surrounded by Johan's bodyguards and the Addams family's subordinates. They were tense and waiting for Johan's order to strike. Johan had originally thought that being outnumbered would shatter Stephen's brave front, but to his surprise, he was as calm as ever. Today was a big day for me and my wife. I didn't want to shed blood, but you left me no choice but to start a massacre. Johan let out a laugh. Stephen, you haven't changed at all. You're seconds from your grave, but you're still boasting shamelessly. Oh, right. What happened to the wedding gifts I prepared for you? Did you bring them with you? If not, your body will be left to rot in the wilderness. Stephen's expression darkened. Johan, you're going to regret ruining my wedding and provoking me more than once. After leaving the venue, he'd already decided that Johan would die here. You still don't understand the situation you're in? Well, if you want to die so badly, then I'll grant your wish. Johan was about to instruct his subordinates to attack when his phone rang. His expression turned serious when he saw the caller ID. You want me to let Stephen go? But I know, Dad. A silence fell over them as Johan ended the call. What happened? Hector asked. One word from you and he'll be dead. No, let him go, Johan said. What? Are you sure? They had put in a lot of effort to set up this trap for Stephen. Their hard work would be wasted if they let Stephen go. Yes, you heard me. Let him go. Johann was arrogant, but not arrogant to the point where he would go against Terence. You're lucky to have escaped death again, Stephen. Leave, and take that traitor Vincent with you, too. This was the perfect opportunity to get rid of Stephen once and for all. Johann couldn't understand why Terence had told him to leave Stephen alone. He hadn't even given him a reason. Johann was unwilling, but he had to obey. Seconds passed, then minutes. Stephen didn't move an inch. Why are you still standing there? Are you too shocked to do anything? You're letting me go, but I never said I would let you go. Stephen found Johann's actions laughable. Was this over because he'd changed his mind after one phone call? Are you provoking me even though I'm sparing you? Johann said, a bit surprised. As expected, low-class people like you always bite off more than you can chew. But if you're not leaving... He glanced at his bodyguards. You all heard what he said, right? I let him go as my father asked me to, but he's refusing and even provoking me. If I killed him, that wouldn't be considered going against my father. No, it wouldn't, Hector said. It would be an act of self-defense. You had no choice. Mr. Terence won't blame you. Johann nodded, satisfied with his answer. All right, today Stephen has to die by my hand. Restrain him, now. His bodyguards and subordinates moved at the same time. Thousands brandished their weapons, but before they could lunge at Stephen, a voice halted them in their tracks. Mr. Johann, please wait! Johann looked over and saw Victoria running towards them. What are you doing here? Are you here to collect your son's corpse? Victoria ignored his sarcastic remark. I just spoke to your father on the phone. He agreed to leave Stephen alone. You can't go against him. Johann had been wondering why Terence had called him out of the blue. It turned out that Victoria was behind this. He did call me, and I was going to let Stephen walk out of here unharmed. But before you go around pointing fingers, you should take a good look at the situation. He doesn't want to leave. Victoria turned to Stephen in confusion. Mom, you should leave first. This is a grudge between Johann and me. He did let me go, but I never said I would let him go. After what Johann had done today, Stephen wouldn't leave without a fight. I told you not to be reckless, Victoria chided. Let's go back. She was worried that Johann would go back on his word, so she wanted to take Stephen and get out of there as soon as possible. But Stephen didn't move. Victoria had another fear. Stephen might attack Johann impulsively, so she held his hands tightly. Think about Kim and your child. Stephen's determination wavered whenever Kim and their child were mentioned. Okay, I'll leave. He threw Johann a dark look. Consider yourself lucky. If it weren't for my mother, your head would have been rolling already. Before I change my mind, pack up and go back to Maryland. If you linger, it won't be that easy for you to leave. Johann grinned. Stephen, listen carefully. I didn't leave home because I was afraid of you. I was here on my father's orders. I missed out on killing you today, but we'll meet again soon. Didn't you openly provoke the Addams family? I'll wait for you. Don't get cold feet. Don't waste your time worrying about that. I'll be there, whether you like it or not. You should prepare yourself. With that, Stephen cut the rope that bound Vincent and brought him out to the mansion with Victoria. After they left, Johann swung a punch at a tree where Vincent had been hanging from. It cracked and fell over with a deafening thud in a shower of branches and leaves. From the dent that had been left in the tree trunk, it was clear that Johann was formidable. Hector watched Stephen, Victoria, and Vincent disappear into the distance. Are you really going to let it end like this? Many people back home were aware that Stephen had survived. It would be difficult for a chance like this to come again. It wouldn't be easy for Johann to kill him, not because he wasn't strong enough, but because he had to take the external factors into consideration. He had to get rid of Stephen without attracting attention, but the likelihood of that happening had decreased now that they'd lost their chance. This was an important time for Terence. His succession ceremony was coming up, and all eyes were on him. There were many who coveted his position, and they were waiting for an opportunity to ruin him. Johann scoffed. What I want doesn't matter. This is what my father decided. I can't go against him. It's too bad our plan went up in smoke because of one woman. Johann wasn't happy about this, but he still listened to Terrence and left the mansion right after. After receiving news that Johann had returned home, Terrence gave Victoria a call. "I've fulfilled your request. Now, it's time for you to fulfill your promise." "I understand," Victoria said. "I'll leave the district tomorrow morning." "I can't wait that long. Leave tonight. Wait by the train station. I'll arrange for someone to meet you there." Terrence didn't want to waste a second. He had to avoid delays that might put his position at risk. Victoria knew his secret, and she could expose him at any time. At midnight, when everyone was asleep, Victoria quietly left the house and met up with Terrence's subordinate at the train station. She got in the car that would take her to Maryland. "Stephen, have you seen Mom?" Kim asked, bright and early the next morning. She'd only seen Leslie in the kitchen. There was no sign of Victoria, and she wasn't in her room. Stephen did his own search around the house, but Victoria was nowhere to be found. He tried calling her, but her phone was off. He asked the Sierra family, but they hadn't heard from her either. "Where could she have gone?" Kim asked anxiously. Stephen recalled what had happened last night. After Johann received Terrence's call, he decided to let him leave. Coincidentally, Victoria arrived shortly afterward. Terrence and Victoria must have reached some kind of agreement, and she had left to fulfill her end of the bargain. Stephen told Kim about the incident last night with Johann. "If the Addams family has Mom, they'll never let her go," Kim said worriedly. Leslie hurried up to them with a piece of paper in hand. It was Victoria's handwriting. "Stephen, Kim, by the time you find my letter, I'll be a long way from home. But don't worry, I'll be fine." "Damn it," Stephen cursed. "It had to have been Terrence. He forced my mother to leave." Kim was pregnant, and the stress would not be good for her, so he decided to ask her to stay home and wait for him. He would take care of this. After finding out that Stephen was the owner of the Wyvern Group, Kim's trust in his capabilities had grown stronger. Stephen rushed out of the house and found the 4 great generals to work out a plan to rescue Victoria. At this time, Victoria had arrived at Terrence's residence. This was the first time they'd seen each other in more than 20 years. Terrence wasn't as young as he used to be, but he had aged well. He was the head of the #1 family in the country. After so many years in this prestigious position, his demeanor had become more intimidating and domineering. Victoria was around the same age, but she'd lost her youthful glow after so many years of imprisonment and suffering. Her illness had made her weak and more frail. To Terrence, she looked like an old woman on the verge of death. They would be mismatched if they stood together. The beautiful young lady he'd once fallen in love with no longer existed, and no one would ever guess that they had an unforgettable love story between them. Victoria's heart was filled with mixed feelings. It seemed like even without her, Terrence had led a comfortable and luxurious life. Terrence's laughter broke the silence. "Why are you laughing?" "It's laughable," Terrence said, holding back another laugh. "How did a woman like you captivate me back then? I must have been blind. Look at your current appearance. What part of you is worthy of me? Leaving you was the best decision. I kept my position and married a woman of much more beauty than you. Castile was right. I was too young all those years ago. I was too fixated on a foolish romance. You'll never compare Laurel with the way you are now. I remember you wanted to marry into my family, but take a good look at what you've become. Would you still have the courage to say the same thing now?" Victoria lowered her head in shame. She'd never seen Laurel before, but from Terrence's description, her beauty was unmatched. Perhaps Terrence had overlooked one thing. If he hadn't treated Victoria so harshly, she would have become someone far greater than Laurel. But her potential had been destroyed in her youth. Victoria felt inferior as she stood before Terrence. It had been more than 2 decades, and the gap between them was only growing wider. Terrence had aged well. He was handsome and full of vigor, but she had become an old woman. "Victoria, it's been a long time since we've met, but don't think I want to rekindle our old relationship. I'm at the head of my family. I've reached the top. Only a woman like Laurel is suitable to stand beside me. You're a sparrow, while she's a phoenix." Every word pierced Victoria's heart like a thorn. She remembered the way he'd treated her lovingly back when they were in a relationship. He'd made many promises, but he'd broken all of them. They were all empty words. When Victoria didn't say anything, Terence continued. Castile was right when he said that one's family determines one's wealth. A royal family could never match up to the Addams family. Take your son, for example. Stephen wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from Johann. That's not true, Victoria retorted for the first time. My son is more outstanding than you can imagine. It didn't matter if Terence belittled her, but she would never let anyone criticize Stephen. Outstanding, Terence laughed. I know he's the owner of the Wyvern Group and that the 51 royal families in New York City are under his command. But so what? His achievements are nothing in front of Johann. He pointed at the pictures and certificates hanging on the wall. Take a good look. These are proof of Johann's achievements. The first photo was taken during the celebration of his 18th birthday. See the woman standing next to him? That's the queen of a country overseas. The second photo was his university's awards ceremony. And look at the certificate. Terence went on and on as Victoria stared impassively at the wall of frames. Now that you've seen all this, do you still think Stephen's better than Johann? Yes, Victoria replied firmly. My son is outstanding. You've talked nonstop for the past 5 minutes to brag about Johann, but both of you have won at birth. Even a fool would be praised as a genius if they had access to the Addams family's resources. Stephen was abandoned from the moment he was born. His environment was no different from an outsider. Everything he's achieved is a result of his own hard work. He's much more impressive than Johann. You. Before Terence could finish, a woman dressed in an extravagant outfit strode into the room. Who just said that their son was more impressive than Johann? Her dominating aura made her seem like a queen. Laurel, why are you here? Terence asked in surprise. Laurel ignored him and went straight to Victoria. Are you Victoria? Yes, I am. Laurel broke into a smug smile. How disappointing. I was expecting the woman who captivated my husband back then to be gorgeous. You're nothing of the sort. That's why I chose you to be my wife over her, Terence cut in. Laurel glanced at him before shifting her gaze back to Victoria. Did you just say that my son, Johann, won from the moment he was born? That's right, Victoria said. Did I say something wrong? Yes, you did. Just like Victoria, Laurel was a protective mother. People could insult her, but not her son. Victoria, you don't know anything about the Addams family. There's a reason they lasted for more than 1,000 years. When Johann was born, he grew up in a dangerous environment surrounded by wolves. He could have been eaten at any time, but he wasn't. He survived there for 3 years. When he was 7, he was sent to Antarctica for harsh training. When he turned 10, he was skilled enough to defeat expert martial artists by himself. Victoria was stunned. She hadn't expected Johann's childhood to be so cruel. This is nothing, Laurel continued. When Johann turned 18, he was sent the world's most dangerous assassin training base. He fought for his life every day until finally he killed all of his opponents and emerged victorious. That was when he obtained the right to be the successor. Victoria didn't have a comeback. Laurel had been with Johann since he was born, but she'd only recently met Stephen again. Laurel had more than 2 decades of experience to share, but she had none. Johann would have the upper hand if he and Stephen had fought. Who knew what kind of inhumane torture Stephen would have to go through? Laurel looked proud of herself, like she'd won a competition. Now you should understand which of our sons is better. Stephen will never match up to Johann. Without waiting for Victoria's reply, Laurel turned to Terence. Why did you bring her here? Are you planning to get back together? That's ridiculous. I brought her here to kill her. Then kill her. What are you waiting for? I'm disgusted just knowing that she's alive. As Laurel spoke, she reached for a sword on display and handed it to Terence. Do it. Terence unsheathed the sword. He caught his reflection on the blade. He and Victoria were worlds apart. As Victoria awaited her death, she found herself having regrets. If she died here, she wouldn't be able to see her grandchild. Victoria raised her head and looked into Terence's eyes. Can you give me some time? I want to see my grandchild before I die." Terence frowned. "Victoria, don't push your luck." But he was worried that Victoria would fight to the death and reveal his secret in front of Laurel. Laurel was his wife, but he would always be at risk as long as someone else knew about the incident. It was not a pleasant feeling. Terence considered it. He sheathed his sword. "All right. Either way, your death has been decided. Giving you a bit more time doesn't make a difference." Terence's subordinates took Victoria away. "Why are you listening to her?" Laurel demanded. "Victoria's locked up. She won't be able to escape. I'll use her as bait to lure Stephen here. Then I'll lock them both up." Laurel's mood lifted. "You're right. Stephen confronted Johan just to save Vincent. He'll definitely come here to save his mother." The Addams family's prison was like an impregnable fortress. Anyone imprisoned would not be able to leave without the head of the family's approval. Terence went down to the prison after parting with Laurel. Victoria wasn't surprised to see him. "So in the end, you still came to kill me." Terence was a bit surprised by her composed attitude. He nodded. "It's good that you know." He loathed the idea that someone else had leverage over him. Victoria had kept her mouth shut for more than 20 years. Now that she was using the past incident against him, there was no guarantee that there wouldn't be a next time. Victoria had to die. Terence stared at her with resentment in his gaze. "You disappoint me. You told me you loved me and that you would do anything for me, even if it meant sacrificing your life. But you're using this against me. I now understand that you never loved me as much as you said you did. I was blind to have fallen in love with you." Victoria laughed. "I'm the one who was blind. I thought someone from the #1 family in the country would be empathetic, loyal, and brave enough to take the lead. But you're nothing but cold-blooded and heartless. You even sacrificed Stephen for your own benefit." "Did you just realize that? In families like ours, power is paramount. People like you are nothing more than tools. Your worth is determined by your value. Once you're deemed useless, you'll be abandoned. But how would you ever understand that?" Terence replied. "That's why you didn't hesitate to give me up, even when I was pregnant with Stephen." "That's right," Terence said. "There's no success without deaths. You're no different from the lowly servants in our family. Laurel is from the Phoenix family, and she's the only woman worthy of being my wife." "That's not the first time you've told me that. But let me ask you this. Do you love Laurel?" Terence was surprised by her question, but he quickly composed himself. "She's my wife. Of course I love her." Victoria shook her head. "No, you don't love her. Your reaction just now was proof." If Terence really loved Laurel, he wouldn't have been hesitating. It was obvious that he'd never considered this before. "What's the matter? Am I right?" Victoria continued. "You don't love Laurel. You only married her because of the family background. You wanted to be affiliated with the second-ranked family in the country. You wanted more resources, capital, and security in your position as the successor." Terence didn't respond because she was right. His silence confirmed Victoria's speculations. "As expected, your ambition is more important than love." "Love?" Terence repeated in disdain. "What is love in front of the highest authority? To stand at the summit, sacrifice is inevitable. Love, family, none of those things are worth anything." Victoria looked him in the eye. "Is that why you killed your older brother back then?" Terence's expression changed. "Victoria, what nonsense are you saying?" That was the secret he'd kept hidden for decades. Back when Terence had yet to become the successor, he was ranked second among the younger generations of the Addams family. Their family had a long history, and there were many outstanding talents and geniuses who he had to compete with. But he'd succeeded and come out on top. He'd even surpassed his older brother, Milo Addams, and become the favorite of the family. Terence was a role model for the younger generation, a role model who was praised by the elders. His confidence soared, and becoming the successor became his goal. Although Milo's martial arts weren't as cultivated as Terence's, he had other areas where he excelled. The elders thought highly of him, and they especially valued his talent for staying calm in even the most emotionally charged situations. He was also the oldest, which automatically gave him the upper hand in the fight for the successor. Milo was an obstacle, and he was in the way of Terrence's ambition. But there was never an opportunity to get rid of him. Finally, one day, when they were dealing with foreign forces together, Terrence held back and let their opponents get a clean hit on Milo. He was forced to the edge of the cliff. Terrence watched from a distance as Milo plummeted to the ravine below. To ensure that nothing went wrong, he even trekked to the bottom of the cliff to finish the job. Victoria was the sole witness to the entire incident. After Milo died, Terrence replaced him as the most promising successor, and in the end, he got what he wanted. He became the head of the family, and soon, his position would be official. If the incident with Milo was revealed, his succession ceremony would be in jeopardy. Even if his position did become official, he wouldn't be able to stop people from questioning him. Multiple betrayals could cause his influence to dwindle over time. "I'm not talking nonsense," Victoria said calmly. A dark look crossed Terrence's face. "Now I really can't let you go." He pulled out a gun and aimed the muzzle at her head. Victoria had already expected this outcome. She'd accepted her death, so she closed her eyes in resignation. 1 second passed, and then another. Time went on in silence. A minute later, Victoria opened her eyes. She saw Terrence looking at her with an unreadable expression. Then, he put his gun away. He turned around and left the prison without a word. His footsteps faded as the prison lapsed into silence. That was when Victoria realized why Terrence had changed his mind. He could have killed her, but he hadn't, because he was worried that she'd told Stephen about the incident with Milo. Her death could trigger Stephen to expose that secret. The succession ceremony was rapidly approaching. Terrence couldn't be reckless. He'd never been worried about his secret getting out, because in the past, Victoria only had eyes for him. No matter what he did, she would always be on his side. But Victoria had changed, and perhaps they all had. In the present, Victoria's son was more important to her than anyone else, even the man she'd promised to die for all those years ago. Terrence returned to his study, unable to calm down. He picked up his calligraphy brush and soaked the tip in ink. He couldn't concentrate. Victoria used to be so loyal to him, but in the span of a few days, she'd already threatened him more times than he could remember. If she was willing to fight to the death and expose his secret in front of Laurel, then what would stop her from telling Stephen? He had to find out if Stephen knew about this. If Victoria had spilled, then he would kill them both. If not, then he would only need to get rid of her. Terrence tossed his brush aside. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Get me Stephen's number." Stephen had been actively preparing for his trip to the Addams family's residence. He'd originally planned to make his move after Kim gave birth, but Victoria's departure had forced him to plan ahead of time. After the wedding ended, Callan, the military base commanders, and the 4 gatekeepers returned to their posts. But the 4 great generals still stood by Stephen's side. Ensuring the commander-in-chief's safety was just as important as defending the borders. Dennis, Rosalind, Zachary, and Jaden were waiting for his order to set off for Maryland. While they were making preparations, Stephen received a call from an unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Who is this?" A familiar voice came from the other line. "Stephen, right? It's Terrence." Stephen tightened his grip on his phone. "Is my mother with you?" Terrence's call at this time couldn't have been a coincidence. He had a motive. Sure enough, Terrence didn't bother hiding it. "Yes, but don't worry, she's fine." Stephen's anxiety lifted just a fraction. "Terrence, I'm warning you now. If anything happens to her, you, your family, and the Addams family will be wiped from existence." Terrence laughed. "You're much more arrogant than I thought." Stephen was capable, but it wasn't enough to take them down. The person who had the ability to ruin the Addams family had yet to appear, and they probably wouldn't for another 1,000 years. "You'll know whether I'm being arrogant or true to my word in the future." "We don't have to wait that long," Terrence said. "Tonight, I'll be making a trip to the district. I have something to discuss with you in person." "You want to see me?" Stephen was surprised because during all of his years with the Addams family, Terrence had never looked him in the eye, not even once. It was like he was invisible. Stephen considered his options. Victoria's safety was more important than anything else. Okay, I'll wait for you. Tell me the time and place, I'll be there. After the call, Stephen discarded his plan. Since Terrence was coming here in person, there was no need for them to go to the Addams family's residence and confront him there. At 10 o'clock in the evening, a private plane landed at Washington, D.C. airport. Terrence's trip had been low profile. He hadn't brought any security personnel along, only the crew members on board. Terrence left the airport and rushed to the designated meeting place. Stephen had been waiting for a while for him to arrive. This was the first time they'd been face-to-face with each other. There was a subtle, imposing aura around Terrence, which was a given, considering his position. He was the head of the Addams family, and the position came with authority. He would definitely be worthy of the title, the most ambitious man of the century, if it existed. Before coming, Stephen had asked Rosalind to run a background check on Terrence. As the world's top hacker, it wasn't difficult to get a hold of his information. Terrence's identity had a confidentiality level of SSS. If Rosalind cracked open the file, the Addams family would know. But after Stephen's identity as his illegitimate son had been exposed, they were much laxer because they assumed there wasn't much else worth discovering. While Rosalind was investigating, she came across a particular incident that had occurred before Terrence became the successor. Rosalind discovered that more than 20 years ago, when Terrence and his older brother Milo were facing a common enemy, Terrence had intentionally held back during the fight. Their scuffle ended with Milo falling off of a cliff. When he was on the brink of death, Terrence stabbed him to kill him off. As the #1 family in the country, the Addams family had always advocated harmony and unity amongst its members. If they found out that Terrence had killed his brother to become the successor, he would receive the harshest punishment, even if he was the head of the family. He would even have to give up his position. The Addams family would never allow someone of Terrence's character to take over. Selfish, cold, and heartless. For personal interests, he would use any means necessary, even if it meant sacrificing the people closest to him. This was Stephen's evaluation of Terrence. As for Terrence, this was also the first time observing Stephen this closely. He'd never paid any attention to his illegitimate son. Or rather, it was more accurate to say that to him, Stephen didn't exist. Stephen had a confident demeanor that reminded him of those pretentious young men from wealthy families. They thought they were invincible after a minor achievement. Little did they know that there was more to the world than the small bubble they lived in. It's understandable for people like us to be arrogant in our youth, Terrence said. It could also be seen as confidence, but being arrogant to the point where you lose sight of your limits is being delusional. Reality will be a rude awakening for you. Stephen shrugged. Between me and Johan, who's more arrogant? Terrence laughed. What qualifications do you have to compare yourself with Johan? Yes, he's arrogant, but he's the son of the Addams and Phoenix families. His bloodline is noble, and his martial arts are unmatched. His achievements are far superior to yours. He has a right to be arrogant. Terrence continued without waiting for Stephen's answer. Do you want to justify yourself because my blood flows within you? Even if that's the case, I'll never admit that you're my son. Unless you can achieve 1/10 of what Johan has achieved. Maybe I'll let you even return to the family. Stephen ignored his sarcasm. Think whatever you want. Are you alone? Where's my mother? Why didn't you bring her along? Terrence lost interest when he didn't have much of a reaction to his remarks. Don't worry, your mother is fine. If you don't believe me, I can show you through video call. Stephen nodded. Terrence initiated a video call with Laurel. From what he could see, Victoria was unharmed. So why are you here? I don't believe you came to see me for no reason. We're father and son, but I doubt you'd be so enthusiastic to come all the way here just to see how I was doing. Stephen had been observing Terrence since he arrived. He hadn't brought a single bodyguard with him, and he'd taken the initiative to prove Victoria's safety. This was not in line with his position as the head of the family. With all this in his mind, Stephen concluded that Terrence was here to test whether he knew what happened between him and Milo. To further prove his speculation, Johann had let him go after one phone call with Terence. And the next day, Victoria disappeared. He was more certain than ever that she had used Terence's secret to bargain for his safety. Terence hesitated. He had to find out how much Stephen knew, but he couldn't ask him directly. He thought it over and decided to start with, "It's been a few months since you met your mother. Did she talk about me?" "Of course she did," Stephen said casually. "She told me a lot about you, including the good and the bad. Which one do you want to hear first?" That wasn't important to Terence. "What I want to know is if she told you more personal things about me." Stephen suppressed the urge to laugh. That was all it took for him to lay his cards on the table. "For example?" "For example, back then." As soon as these words left Terence's mouth, he realized that he was about to give himself away. He quickly modified his sentence. "For example, some of my secrets." Stephen gave him a smile. "Of course, she told me lots of things. Some were very personal and private, but it's only natural. It's normal for someone of your status to have a lot of secrets." Terence's confidence was shaken. "What?" The look on Stephen's face unsettled him. Did he know, or did he not know? Terence couldn't tell. What if he was referring to something else? Terence had a lot of secrets, but the incident with Milo was the most dangerous one. He had to find out if Stephen knew about it or not. "What secrets about me did your mother tell you?" "Nothing that you wouldn't already know." Terence was starting to get annoyed. It was obvious that Stephen had given him a vague answer on purpose. He was playing with him. But Terence was at a loss because he couldn't say it directly. From Stephen's expression, it seemed like he already knew what he was referring to. But there was a chance that Stephen didn't know. He couldn't risk it. "You can be more specific," Terence said after a long pause. "More specific? Are you sure?" Stephen pretended to look around. "This is a remote place, but you know what they say. The walls have ears. Aren't you worried that you'll be exposed?" Terence was once again speechless. He subconsciously let his murderous intent slip. Stephen's senses were sharp, so he could sense the subtle shift. "Do you want to kill me? As expected of a member of the Addams family. Killing someone to silence them is like a pastime hobby. If you want to kill me, then come at me. Show me what you're capable of. Your hands are dirty anyway. There's no need to hesitate." Terence's eyes narrowed. How had Stephen sensed his intentions? It had to have been a fluke. They had been talking in circles, but it was enough for him to conclude that Stephen knew about it. If he didn't, he wouldn't have been so calm and played word games with him. What if Stephen used this to threaten him into letting him return to the Addams family? Terence knew that if Stephen came back, he wouldn't let himself be bullied like in the past. Stephen would pressure him using his secret and might even take over the successor position from Johann. Terence could never let that happen. He made a decision right then and there. Even if Stephen exposed him, he would never let him return to the family. "Stephen, I don't care what you know. You can forget about using it to threaten me. I'll never agree to your request." Stephen laughed. "And just what is this request of mine?" "Stop pretending. I know you want to use my secret against me to force me to let you back into the family." Stephen laughed harder. "You think too highly of yourself and the Addams family. I'll tell you right now that neither of you is worth my attention. You came all the way here to find out how much I knew, and I can tell you with certainty that I do know what you're trying to hide." Terence's mind raced. Sure enough, Stephen had found out. With his cunning personality, there was a chance that he'd told someone else. Killing him wouldn't stop others from spreading the incident. Stephen grinned. "Are you nervous? Are you afraid that I'll expose you? Or are you worried that I've already spread the word?" Terence's stomach clenched. Stephen knew exactly what he was thinking. "Don't worry," Stephen said. "I know about it, but I won't be using it to threaten you. You're not worth the effort." Terence was beginning to feel like if he stayed here another minute, he would explode from anger. Wasn't Stephen looking down on him too much? But Terence kept his anger in check. The best course of action was to make Stephen and Victoria keep their mouths shut until his succession ceremony was over. After his position was secure, he would think of another way to get rid of them. If you keep it to yourself, I'll guarantee your mother's safety, and I'll stop coming after you."
"You're naive, Terrence. Did you think I'd be grateful to hear that?"
"What do you want?" Terrence gritted out. Stephen had provoked him and the Addams family multiple times now. If it were anyone else, Terrence would have already killed him 10 times over. Stephen held up 3 fingers.
"I have 3 things I want to say. First, let my mother come back. If she's missing even a single strand of her hair, I'll make you regret it for the rest of your life."
He ignored Terrence's menacing expression and continued.
"Second, I'll give you 1 year to prepare."
"Prepare for what?"
"My wife will have given birth to our child by then. When the time comes, I'll fulfill my promise and pay a visit to the Addams family. I'll make sure that everyone who made my mother suffer will be punished accordingly. Especially you, Terrence. That should give you an idea of how to prepare."
Terrence had met many overconfident and arrogant people before in upper-class circles, but he'd never met someone as arrogant as Stephen. Provoking the Addams family to make those who had hurt Victoria get the punishment they deserved was laughable. The Addams family had a long history. Even the government wouldn't touch them. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that there wasn't a single force in the entire country that would be confident enough to challenge them. "As long as you and your mother keep your mouths shut, I can let her go," Terrence said. "As for your second point, aren't you just talking nonsense? Everyone who was involved was at the top of the ranks. Are you sure you can manage that by yourself?"
"I can, and I will," Stephen replied confidently. "That's not the only thing. I want you to know that my mother is too good for you, and I'm much stronger than Johan."
The more this conversation dragged on, the more Terrence thought that Stephen had gone crazy. Any sane and rational person would never say such words. "Okay, then I'll wait. Now, what's your third point?" Stephen's gaze turned cold.
"I'm going to end Johan's life right in front of you."
From the moment Johan had showed up at his wedding with the memorial tablet, urn, and wreath, he'd already decided that killing him was inevitable. Stephen had prepared for months on end to give Kim the wedding of the century that she deserved. He was even prepared to reveal his identity as the commander-in-chief, but Johan had ruined everything. That moment would never come again. Among all the heinous crimes that Johan had committed, that was the one thing Stephen could never forgive. "Have you lost it, Stephen?" Terrence asked incredulously. "You stand no chance against him." He and Laurel had prepared a security team for more than 1,000 bodyguards for Johan. They were experienced on land and in the air. As long as they were around, Johan would be safe.
"That's what you think, but let me tell you this. I've never failed to kill my targets."
"Fine, since you're so confident, I'll wait for you. When do you plan to make your move? 1 year later?" Stephen nodded.
"That should be more than enough time for you and the Addams family to make sufficient preparations. I didn't want you to say that it's unfair and that I didn't give you enough time to prepare."
This wasn't the first time Terrence had heard something like this. So far, Stephen had been using others to pass on his messages, but this time he was provoking him directly. "Fine by me," Terrence said. "How about a bet while we're at it?"
"What are we betting?"
"If you succeed in setting foot in the Addams family 1 year later, then I'm willing to admit defeat. I'll kneel in front of you and your mother in public and accept any punishment from you." Terrence wanted to steer the conversation away from the past incident with Milo. Stephen was proud and arrogant. Someone with that much pride would never use other people's weaknesses against them, but it didn't hurt to tread carefully. Making a bet with Stephen would give him time to secure his position and ensure that his secret would not be leaked before the succession ceremony. Stephen saw right through him, but he accepted the bet anyway.
"Sure. 1 year later, I'll be coming for you and your family. If I fail, then you can do whatever you want to me."
"Then it's settled," Terrence said. When Laurel found out that Terrence had gone to Washington, D.C. without informing her, she was so anxious that she couldn't sleep for an entire night. Terrence came back at dawn. Laurel hurried over the moment he stepped in the door. "Did you go to the district?" "Yeah, I went to see Stephen." "What? Why?" It's been more than 2 decades. I wanted to see what kind of person he's become. Unfortunately, he's nowhere near Johan's level. He's too confident and headstrong for his own good. That's why I made a bet with him." Laurel's mood brightened when she heard about the bet. "Using a bet to toy with him is genius, Terrence. He'll never match up to us, not even in 1,000 years. I'm looking forward to knocking him off his perch." With this bet in place, Stephen and Victoria will keep quiet for the time being. I'll also use this chance to publicize my succession ceremony. Laurel, there are 2 things that you need to do before then. First, free Victoria and let her go back home. Second, spread the news of the bet between me and Stephen. Tell everyone in our circle. Make sure everyone knows about it. Shortly after, Victoria returned home to Washington, D.C. The bet between Terrence and Stephen spread like wildfire in the upper-class circles of Maryland. Terrence's reputation soared in the process, which was exactly what he'd expected to happen. It wasn't just the Addams family that frowned upon illegitimate children. They were a disgrace to most wealthy families. There were many who would dispose of them immediately. But Terrence had not only admitted to Stephen's existence, but he'd also given him a chance to challenge the Addams family for the right to return. His bet received a lot of praise. The upper-class families supported Terrence in taking over the family. The elders in the Addams family were no exception. They saw his actions as sincere and magnanimous. These were traits that would allow him to lead the family and ensure their prosperity. The publicity of the bet hadn't only increased the upper classes and the elders' favorability towards Terrence. It had also spread Stephen's name. Almost all of the upper-class families in the country had heard about the bet. Because it involved the Addams family, it became the talk of the states. While Victoria was on her way home, she'd overheard several passerbys discussing the bet between Terrence and Stephen. She quickened her pace and looked for Stephen the second she went home. "Why did you agree to that bet? Even I could tell that it was a trap." Victoria didn't think Stephen would ever be strong enough to challenge the Addams family, and it wasn't just her. Everyone who heard about the bet thought that Stephen was sure to lose. When the bet was first publicized, many wealthy families had investigated the Addams family, even those who had never heard of them. They discovered that the requirements to become a member of the Addams family were extraordinarily high. Some examples included making a name for yourself in politics, becoming a high-ranking official, joining the army and making a notable achievement, becoming a big shot in the business industry, or becoming a skilled martial artist. These requirements were out of reach for ordinary people. They would be overjoyed if anyone in their family were this successful. But to the Addams family, this was just the entry requirement. Stephen's identity as the owner of the Wyvern Group was worthy of praise to a majority of the upper-class families, but it was not enough for the Addams family. If he were the owner of 10 successful businesses like the Wyvern Group, then maybe that would be another story. However, there was only 1 year left until the bet. It wasn't realistic for Stephen to establish 10 more companies like the Wyvern Group. Everyone thought that he would lose, but they had no idea that he wasn't as weak as they thought he was. The 4 great generals were strong enough to go against Terrence, and Stephen's identity as the commander-in-chief was one that the Addams family held great respect for. Being the owner of the Wyvern Group was one of his weakest achievements. "Mom, you don't have to worry," Stephen said with a smile. "Terrence thinks I'm weak, but I'm not, and I certainly wouldn't agree to a bet I couldn't win. I know very well what I'm doing. Just wait 1 more year. Terrence will be on his knees and apologizing soon enough." Stephen's confidence had a way of rubbing off on people. Victoria still had her doubts, but she couldn't deny that he'd resolved every crisis they'd encountered recently. She decided to believe in her son. "Okay, I'll wait for it." When the Cassidy and Haynes families heard about the bet, chaos ensued. They had an emergency meeting to discuss countermeasures. "Stephen's getting out of control," Helen exclaimed. "Not only did he refuse Mr. Johan's request during the wedding, but he's also even challenging the Addams family. If Kim wasn't pregnant, my Haynes family would have cut all ties with him," Mavis said. Despite everything, Kim did have a net worth of $100 billion. Even though she had the support of the Wyvern Group, she would do just fine on her own. Unfortunately, she would never abandon Stephen. "I heard the Addams family has decided on set criteria that Stephen has to fulfill to return to the family," Rome chimed in. These days, the Cassidy family was calling him the all-knowing divine master, because, as his title suggested, he knew everything.
What are they? Helen asked. Tell us about them.
Okay, listen well, Rome said seriously. Stephen only needs to fulfill one of them. As you know, the Addams family is ranked first in the country. The requirements to join them are unimaginably high. But the question is, how high? Let's use the criteria that they set for Stephen. First, he must be able to surpass Lennox Adams, the leader of the Sky Division, which is a squad under the Commander-in-Chief's command. Second, he must defeat Fabian Adams. Among the younger generations in the Addams family, Johann is the strongest, while Fabian is the weakest. That's why he was nicknamed the gatekeeper of the family. Third, Stephen's forte lies in the business industry. His Wyvern Group is better than Imperial Holdings, but that's only one of the many businesses that the Addams family owns. If it weren't for Kim and Stephen's involvement in the project with $100 billion capital, Johann would have never paid attention to Imperial Holdings. To put it simply, Stephen's Wyvern Group is nothing in the face of the Addams family's multitude of businesses.